Satnam and welcome to OpalRoseOracle. It's so good to be here with you on this beautiful Venus day. We're going to have our story time where we continue changing women and our sisters and our journey through the goddesses from around the world and how the divine feminine has presented herself over and over. Last week, we read the story of Isha. This week, we're going to continue with the tale of Ameratsu, the supreme Shinto deity. Ameratsu is the supreme deity of the Japanese Shinto religion. Her name means great, shining, heavenly brightness. Through her actions, the universe is granted order and fertility. She is also revered as the ancestor of the Japanese emperor. The myth of Ameratsu's encounter with her brother, Susanoo, describes the beginning of the emperor's ancestral heritage. Traditionally, the emperor was believed to be the direct descendant of the gods and goddesses who were born when Susanoo and Ameratsu fought. And get a good look at Ameratsu. You can see the sun shining behind her and how beautiful and strong and powerful she is. And that, in the background, must be her brother, Susanoo. If you're ready, we're gonna dive in. In the beginning, there was nothing. No land, no sea, no sky. The earth and the sky began to separate, and the gods were born in heaven. Izanagi and Izanami, the first mother and father, were sent down from heaven to prepare the earth for humans to live there. Together, they made the land and the sea, the islands and mountains and rivers and trees. Izanagi and Izanami regarded the beautiful world they had created. And then they decided to make something wonderful, a marvelous being who would rule the universe. That is how they gave birth to Ameratsu, goddess of the sun. From the moment she was born, she shone so brightly that all the world was illuminated. Izanagi and Izanami were filled with joy. Let's get another good look of Ameratsu. We have had many children together, said Izanami, but none of them are equal to this beautiful baby. Yes, agreed Izanagi. This baby is by far the best of all that we have created. We must not keep her here with us too long, but send her at once up to heaven and entrust her with the affairs of heaven. With these words, Izanagi took off his necklace of jewels and hung it around Ameratsu's neck. Then he sent her up to the sky. At that time, heaven and earth were not very far apart, and it was easy for Ameratsu to climb up the pillar into heaven. Once there, she shone more brightly than ever, and all the heavenly gods were full of rejoicing to have her with them. Ameratsu had a brother named Susanoo. From the time he was born, Susanoo was always weeping and wailing. Nothing made him happy. Izanagi told him to rule over the ocean, but Susanoo was too angry to rule properly. His tantrums made enormous tidal waves that destroyed the islands. His weeping and wailing caused typhoons and hurricanes to form. Everywhere he went, Susanoo brought destruction and turmoil with him. At last, Izanagi became tired of his behavior and sent him off to the island of the dead. "Very well," said Susanoo. "I will leave this earth and go to dwell in the land of the dead. But first, give me permission to say goodbye to my sister." Ameratsu. Goodbye to my sister in heaven, the shining Ameratsu. Izanagi gave his son permission, and Susanoo began climbing the sky pillar up to heaven. When he arrived in heaven, the first thing he saw were the emerald green rice fields Ameratsu had planted, stretching across the entire plain of heaven. At the sight of his sister's fine rice fields, Susanoo was filled with jealous rage. He flooded the fields with foul waters. He filled the ditches with waste. He poisoned the soil so that nothing good could ever grow there. Not content with ruining his sister's rice fields, he went to her palace and ransacked it, spreading filth everywhere. He went to the hall where the heavenly goddesses were weaving silken cloths. Jumping onto the roof of the hall, he tore off roof tiles and threw rotten carcass of dead horse down onto the goddesses weaving below, so that some of them were thrown onto their shuttles and crushed to death. When Ameratsu first saw the havoc her brother was wreaking, she tried to make excuses for him. When he ruined her rice fields, she said he had only been trying to help her harvest the rice and hadn't understood how much damage he was doing. When he ransacked her palace, she said that he had been drunk and unaware of his destruction. But when he caused the death of the lovely weaving goddesses, she was appalled. In grief and disgust, she closed herself in a dark cave and refused to come out. Now all the gods and goddesses were frightened and distressed, for without the sun goddess, both heaven and earth were thrown into darkness. They had to do all their work by candlelight, and many tragedies occurred because no one could see properly. Finally, the 800 gods and goddesses of heaven assembled at the mouth of the cave where Ameratsu had hidden herself. They wanted to find some way to make her come out. After much discussion, they finally conceived of a plan. First, they wove beautiful new cloths for one another and made many musical instruments and spears and swords from precious metals. The gods and goddesses of metalsmithing fashioned a huge mirror in the shape of the sun. They set the mirror in front of the cave. Finally, they brought all the roosters in heaven to the mouth of the cave and ordered them to crow without stopping. Then all the gods and goddesses of heaven began to jingle their spears and swords to sing and make music. One of the goddesses jumped up on a wooden tub and started dancing, and her dance was so funny that all the gods and goddesses started to laugh, which was a wonderful sound indeed. When Ameratsu heard the 800 gods and goddesses of heaven laughing, she was astonished. She thought they should be weeping and wailing now that everything was dark. She pushed aside the rock that barred the entrance to her cave, just a crack, and peeked out. "Why are you laughing? Why are you singing and dancing?" she asked the gods and goddesses. "Come out, cried 800 gods and goddesses. "We are so happy, for we have found one who is even more beautiful than you," called the dancing goddess. "Come and look at her." While she was speaking, the other gods and goddesses held the mirror before the entrance of the cave, so Ameratsu could see her own reflection. How lovely she was! Full of amazement, the sun goddess crept out of the cave so that she could gaze into the mirror. As soon as she was all the way out, the gods and goddesses pushed back the rock and jammed it so tightly into the mouth of the cave that no one has ever been able to move it again. Then they took Ameratsu by the hand and led her to the new palace they had built for her. They gave her beautiful silken robes to wear. They showered her with jewels and flowers. They beseeched her never to shut herself away again. When the universe felt once more the warmth of the sun and saw her dazzling light spread out across all heaven and earth, the gods rejoiced. They saw that all was finally as it should be. Then they agreed that Susanoo must leave forever. They cut off his beard and forced him to pay a heavy fine. Then they drove him from the sky, but Susanoo began to climb back up again. "If I must leave forever, I must see my sister again face to face," he shouted. "I will never leave unless I can see her." The sea foamed and raged, the mountains and rivers shook, the hills groaned aloud, and every land and country quaked as Susanoo climbed the sky pillar back to heaven. From high in her heavenly palace, Ameratsu heard him coming. She tied back her hair with a string of jewels. She put on her shining armor and slung her bow and arrow across her shoulder. She belted her sword to her side. Fully armed, she strode to the edge of heaven and met her brother as she reached the top of the sky pillar. "Dear sister, I mean you no harm." Susanoo cajoled. "From the beginning, I never meant to hurt you. Our father was cruel, sending me to the land of the dead. I only wanted to say goodbye to you before I left." "How can I know what you're saying is true?" Ameratsu asked him. "Let us create children together. If the children I create are male, then you will know my intentions are good," Susanoo told her. "Then give me your sword," said Ameratsu. He handed her his sword, and Ameratsu broke into 3 parts. She crunched the parts in her teeth and blew the fragments away. From the mist of her breath were born 3 goddesses, lovelier than the stars. Susanoo took the jeweled necklace that Ameratsu wore and crunched the jewels in his teeth, then blew away the fragments. From the mist of his breath were born 5 gods, princes of heaven. So Ameratsu saw that her brother's heart was pure. Susunowo left her and went willingly to the land of the dead, where he will remain for all eternity. And from that time forward, Ameratsu has ruled over heaven in peace and tranquility. And that is the tale of Ameratsu, the sun goddess and the supreme Shinto deity of Japan. If you enjoyed our story, I hope you'll join us next week. I am very much looking forward to next week's goddess. Next week, we are going to be reading the tale of Inanna, one of my favorite goddesses, the queen of heaven and earth, and an ancient Sumerian goddess. So if you enjoyed our goddess story time, please share it with your friends who you think would also enjoy it. I send you all my love, infinite gratitude, and many, many blessings to all of you during this holiday season. Please stay healthy, and may your lives be filled with joy and harmony and infinite blessings. And may your 2021 be light, bright, and filled with joy. Till next week, love and infinite blessings. Take care.